Hi, welcome. It's Donald Davidoff, co-founder and CEO of Real Estate Business Analytics, here for yet another episode of The People Behind the Performance, where I sit down with key leaders and disruptors in our industry to dive into what's really driving the real estate industry's success, the role data plays in it, and maybe more importantly, tell some of the stories of the people behind it. I'm here today with a longtime friend, Kendall Pretzer. She's the Chief Executive Officer at Grace Hill. Kendall joined Grace Hill in 2018 after her company, The Strategic Solution, was purchased. The Strategic Solution was really the leading organization to help with policies and procedures, along with the training that goes with it. Prior to being named CEO, she served as the COO at Grace Hill, covering account management, customer success, and people success. In multifamily and commercial real estate for more than 30 years, she's been with Trammell Crow Residential, with Gables Residential, R&B Commercial Management, and Security Capital prior to it becoming Archstone, and then after it becoming Archstone, I think I recall. She's been a vice president of training and marketing, a senior regional manager, a financial analyst, a project management, and an assistant director of business development. Lots of things in Kendall's background. I'm looking forward to chatting with her. There you go. Lots of hats. And a cat that may join us in the middle of the, conversation.
Yeah.
It's all good. So Kendall, when you think about the state of the industry today, right? We've turned a new year. What's on your mind?
Ooh, lots of good things. I'm super excited about the technology that real estate is really looking into right now, and the prop tech that's available, and where that's really going to take our industry. You know, it has. Oop, did I go out there?
You're good. We heard you. Keep going.
That it really. When I started my days on site, I started in a commercial firm, and our building shared a fax machine. And so when you think about that today to where, to get to today where all this data that's available to us, and that we're looking at it, we're looking at on this little computer we hold in our pocket, and that I'm excited about that, and excited about where Grace Hill's role in that is. So lots of good stuff in 2023.
Yeah, so you have a very interesting personal story, right? From site to CEO of a very well-respected vendor. How did you start out in the industry, and what fueled your rise to CEO of such a respected company?
Yeah, it's an interesting, we all land here, and all have an interesting path. I came out of college with a finance degree and didn't want to go into banking. So that was really kind of what started me looking into, and I got hired with R&B Commercial Management out of LA, and started as a financial analyst. And back in the day, I was doing things like, how much are we spending on paint across our org, and should we hire in-house painters, or should we keep contracting it, and that sort of thing. So I did that, went on site, and then through technology. Actually, at the time, R&B was HP's largest user. And had developed a bunch of budget models and that sort of thing. And I started training those, which sort of then got me into the training world, software training world. And then, got hired by Trammell Crow Residential. That was my jump over to the multifamily side, and had the training. And then from
Shoot, we just lost. We just lost Kendall. Here we go, coming back. Hey, Kendall, I think we got you back.
Okay, I was like, I went away.
No worries. So yes, we let's pick up where you had just gone over to Trammell Crow, which got you into the multifamily side.
Yeah, got me in the multifamily side, and then from there I did training, and then I, moved, and I did corporate housing for them, marketing, sort of that whole Trammell Crow part, the first Trammell Crow, and then they became Gables, and which was my toe into the REIT world. And then went to work for Security Capital, which was then Archstone, or then became Archstone. So, and then through that kind of did all the sort of support services, what I would call them, and then went into operations where, was a regional and managed some portfolios, for those companies too, which for me, I think now really gives me the perspective, particularly now on the supplier side, I really did sit in those shoes. I really did tour investors. I really did have to write REIT reports. We really were looking for pennies. I've done
Mhm.
that. And
Yeah.
so I think that gives, me and, the team that I try to surround myself with some interesting perspective that we really do know what that looks like, what that world looks like.
I think that credibility is huge. I mean, at the risk of getting a little commercial, we at REBA, we say we're for multifamily by multifamily.
Mhm.
And Chris and I
Yeah.
ate the dog food at Archstone. I mean, it's all built on things that we had to do. And certainly prospects and clients tell us they can tell that we really understand that. I'm sure you get some of the same comments.
Right.
So what gave you then the entrepreneurial bug to go out on your own, and then maybe the back end of that? Okay, now you've been running your own business. All of a sudden you decide to get acquired, and in most cases, let's be honest, leaders don't usually stick around after the acquisition. You stuck around quite a while,
Yeah.
and now here you are, CEO of
Here
Grace
I
Hill.
am.
So that's a
I
very
know.
unique story too.
And I do apologize. I have a new kitten who is now awake and decided to all kinds of things, and I've tried to close her out, but
It's all good.
it's my mother used to talk about that, I had a lemonade stand when I was, less than 10, and,
Mhm.
hired my little sister to go out there and man the stand. And, so I think I've always had a little bit of that bug.
Mhm.
And, when I was at Archstone, and that was a little bit, I kind of done both the training and the marketing and then into the operations. Really quit at that point, decided to go do something else. We had a family business I had to go run. My dad was ill. And so it really was like at that point, I had to quit the corporate world to go kind of
Mhm.
resurrect the family business. And from that, my other company got born because people started calling me, asking me if I could help do some things. And one of the conversations I remember having was, I'll help you do this. I'll help you write policy and procedure manuals, but let's do it in a different way. And
Mhm.
so, that's really kind of how that business, got born. And then kind of fast forward, 18 years when I did that
Mhm.
business, and, had the opportunity to raise my children and be around a bit more and that sort of thing. Hired a bunch of women that were, wanted to work, but also were
Mhm.
juggling some sort of family commitment. So that was a little bit of that interesting story. And then 2018, just kind of, I got approached by Grace Hill. I had been approached by Grace Hill over the years, and finally at this point, it just sort of began to make sense. I realized in order to scale, I really needed some additional backing. And
Mhm.
Grace Hill came to talk to me. It made sense to put training and policies together. It always had. We had always
Yeah.
partnered, and it made sense. And so, yeah, I didn't sort of expect to be here, and certainly didn't expect to be in a broader Grace Hill world. But when I
Mhm.
sold it, it was fun, and I
Mhm.
wasn't done working, and just kind of kept going on. And then had the opportunity a year and a half ago, was appointed CEO, and so
Yeah.
yeah, here I am.
So throughout, I mean, we've all had people who help guide us on the way. Who's been your most influential professional mentor?
Oh, that's a great question. I think over the years, I look back, I kind of look back all the way to now. I mean, I seldom think I'm the smartest person in the room. So when I look back and think about who helped me, I mean, some of our Archstone friends, Jim Potts was probably one of
Yeah.
my favorite bosses, in that when Jim, when you got done, I reported to him directly. And when you got done talking to Jim or talking about an idea, you always felt successful. If he
Mhm.
didn't, he never said, no, that's not what we're going to do it. He questioned me into the answer. And that was
Mhm.
such a great technique. And I learned that and loved that. And then, Dave Woodward is a great person that
Yep.
has always been, a high idea person and has always helped me brainstorm. Sue Ansel has played that role for me.
Mhm.
I loved working here with Drew Armstrong. She's a very
Yeah.
bright woman, and that someone who is not from the industry to sort of see that
Yeah.
perspective in technology. So Donna Summers, Emily Watson, I think are some of the smartest women around.
Yeah.
And so I kind of talked to all these people, plus all the smart people at Grace Hill. Again, I'm
Mhm.
very collaborative, and typically kind of let's talk about some ideas, and the best idea comes from all of us.
I she's so humble that I think she'd even be embarrassed that I'm about to say this, but Sue Ansel's name comes up more often in this question on this series than any other name.
Yeah.
One of my favorite people in the industry.
Yeah. She and I were colleagues way back in the day at Trammell Crow. And so we've got all kinds of some good stories about working together. I mean, back when, gosh, we were converting from, paper rent rolls to, and she and I worked on some of those projects together. So yeah, we go way back.
Wow. So you talked a little bit right there, and also the old fax machines. What else do you see as sort of fundamentally changing over the 25, 30 years that you've been in the business?
Yeah. Well, it's got to be technology. That's got to be the thing. And I think we in the multifamily space, tend to be anecdotal, and the people that really were good at running real estate had a gut innate sense of they could look at a financial statement and tell you what was wrong with the property, or they could do some analysis and say, look at these things. And those people, over my career are really unicorns. And there's a good amount of them, but now I see the technology that we're really serving up to people, that it's not limited to just a few. It's really broadcast to many. And you can say, hey, these are the things that we're seeing, and look at this data, and everybody could look at it, or everybody sees it, or I'm going to give you a little head start in going to look at something. So I think that's really
if you've got 4,000 or 5,000 units in your portfolio, you probably can sort of know everything. But when you get up 15, 20, or 25, 30, even more, our Archstone days, 50,000 plus, Gables is 30,000 units. I mean, just the people who are that good just can't be there for every community manager. So you've got to find ways to get them the data.
Right.
Yeah,
that's right.
Really fascinating.
And then to do what to do with it, and what recommendations do you have?
Yeah. Yeah, I think the transition also from sort of, what is it? I'll use the buzzwords from data to information, right? Data is just a bunch of numbers. Information makes it clear what I should do about it.
Right.
I think both our companies are really on a mission to help people with that.
Yeah.
So here's one of my favorite questions. So looking back, what could 2023 Kendall, what do you wish 2023 Kendall could teach that 1990s Kendall that today? Back then, there was no way you could know it. But what do you wish 1990s Kendall could have known?
Well, for one thing, I would say the 25-year-old Kendall was not as smart as she thought she was. I would say that. I think back about some of the things I said in meetings or did. I'm like, oh my gosh, I think we've been slow in the real estate industry to adopt technology. But now we have gone leap, at record speed now. So, I think back at 2005, when I was at NAA talking about web-based policy manuals, and I remember having to explain what web-based meant. And my IT partner at the time, who was not in our industry, was just shocked that our industry didn't really know that. And so I think I would say I would go back, but now I think we've obviously caught up, and we're really pushing the envelope. I would say I would have kind of wished I had done a bit more forwardness in the technology that existed in the world that didn't exist in multifamily. I think I wish I would have had a little bit more of a crystal ball of, hey, this is coming, don't ride the multifamily wave, ride the world.
I mean, it's interesting. The story you just told reminded me just a couple years into my career, in multifamily. So I was still at Tal Solutions. I went to a NAREIT conference, and to give you an idea how long ago that was, Dick Michaud was CEO. Before the anyway. I mean, that's going way back. But I remember coming back to my bosses, and we were in the business of selling software, right? Pricing, revenue management software.
Right.
And I remember telling them, like, guys, you think this is going to be easy in this industry because it's such a compelling offer.
Right.
I listened to them. They're all deal guys. They'll like buy companies, but I don't think one of them has ever written a 6-figure check for software. And so, not only do we have to convince them of the compelling business proposition, like we got to get them used to buying technology, not starting companies to do technology.
Yeah.
Really, really interesting background there. And you lived through some of that.
Yeah, for sure. And I think then, and the other adage of, well, we've been able to be successful doing it without that.
Mm-hmm.
Can we be, why do we need that now? And so I think we've all gotten there, but to your point, it's been a little bit of slow on the uptick.
Yeah. So let me turn to something a little more deeply personal. You had a somewhat recent battle with breast cancer.
Yeah.
That obviously can be a very personal thing. So
Mhm.
what motivated you to be so public in sharing what I imagine may even still be a fairly difficult journey?
Yeah, thanks for the opportunity. It's 2 years ago, so I'm past 2 years, 2 and a few months past diagnosis. And
Congratulations.
so thank you. Yes, and I was one of the lucky ones in that, it was detected through my normal mammogram,
Mm-hmm.
and there's a little bit of a gift of COVID in there, in that my normal mammogram got delayed, and so when I finally sort of rescheduled it and got in, they detected it. It was super early. They said that it had probably, mine was the slow growing kind. Once again, super lucky about that. They said it had actually probably been there for several years. So I'm sort of wondering,
Mm-hmm.
if I'd had it at my normal time, would I have gone a whole nother year? So I got really lucky. Again, I'm a very big proponent of preventive medicine and, getting your mammograms. The interesting for me, which is again one of the reasons why I chose to be, I don't want to be the spokesperson, but if
Mm-hmm.
I'm always, if I can help people or help problem solve, I'm in. um,
Mm-hmm.
is that, I also was tested positive for the ATM gene, which is not the BRCA genes, which people talk about,
Okay.
being the breast cancer genes, but the
Right.
ATM gene is another gene that they didn't even test for 5 years ago. Well, now they test for it, and
Okay.
it links prostate cancer and breast cancer. So my father
Oh.
had prostate cancer. So it begins to all kind of like, So now when I've told men that, and I've said,
Mm-hmm.
hey, if you got prostate cancer in your family, or you have it, and you got daughters, their risk of breast cancer just went up 2 to 5 times.
Wow.
Well, I didn't know that. Anytime
Yeah.
through my life, I've never had breast cancer in my family. Had it. That's what they ask you. And then, all of a sudden I'm like, wow, there's a connection here. And it's this gene. So
That's interesting.
yeah, so that's one of the reasons I decided to kind of talk about it, because I think men are always like, yeah, the breast cancer, it happens to my mom, my sister, my wife, whatever.
Right.
But
Don't think about it.
now, yeah, now there's well, if you have prostate cancer or something in your family, it could be impacting the women in your family about breast cancer who have had no history. And
Hmm.
so,
Yeah, I honestly, I'm learning that for the first time right now. So
yeah,
I'm
yeah.
glad I asked the question.
Yeah, it's interesting. I talked to a gal through my journey, who had actually had made some choices 5 years ago. They didn't even test for the ATM gene. She didn't even know she had it. Then she, I think that, I don't know when they started testing for it, but then they started testing where she found out she had it, and then went ahead and changed her treatment course because of it. So,
Because of it. Yeah.
yeah. So
No, it's fascinating. The growth of personalized medicine and gene-based medicine
gene
it's
technology,
stunning. And we're and and,
absolutely.
and and to use an overused metaphor in our industry, we're in the early innings of that as well. I won't
Mhm.
ask you any innings questions. I promise that. Um, so
I'm
okay,
a
so back
football fan. Yeah.
football. Yeah,
Baseball.
nobody ever asks what quarter are we in, right? I don't know what it is about innings. I guess because there's 9 of them, it gives you more
Right.
gives you a little more context. We're at 7. Next time I get asked the innings questions, I'm going to go, well, I don't know what innings we're in, but I think we're at 7:52 in the second quarter. How's that?
That's right.
That'll play. I like that. So your company focuses on personal performance and development. I mean, when you look back at your own development, what are your favorite industry publications or resources that you would recommend folks newer in the industry might tap into?
Yeah, I mean, I have always been an attendee of
Mhm.
NAA and TAA, Texas Apartment Association, and
Yeah.
NMHC. And every time I go to those, I sit and I'll try to pick something, and I am taking all kinds of notes. It spurs thoughts, it spurs ideas. I'm a
Mhm.
big proponent of those kind of conferences. And then some of the conferences that are maybe, a click away, that are a little bit,
Mhm.
maybe a little bit different, but again, to spur some ideas, some customer service kinds or that sort of thing. So
Yeah.
I'm an auditory learner. And
Okay.
so I like hearing and listening and that sort of thing. I mean, I read some too, but
Mhm.
Really like the conferences and that kind of concentrated, information.
Excellent. So let's move to my favorite subject, data, right? And I know you love data, as you talked about
Yeah.
already. But I mean, we throw the word around so much, but what does data-driven decision making mean to you?
We at Grace Hill have realized for quite some time that we sit on a bunch of information, and primarily around our customers' employees.
Mhm.
And, and then we also sit on a bunch of resident and tenant data, about the properties and communities and assets that are these employees manage, both
Mhm.
commercially and multifamily. And so I think, as we've talked, pulling all that information together. Can I tell you about a maintenance associate at a property, what training they've had, how they did in that, what their level of satisfaction of working there is, what policies have they read, are
Mhm.
they doing all the important ones? And then how do the residents feel about that particular property where that person works? So can I
Mhm.
pull all that to get together and give
Mhm.
that to you and say, hey, this property may not be performing as well as your budget shows.
Mhm.
Maybe look at these areas. And to really
Mhm.
pull all that together, we've expanded our data team now, to really begin to kind of pull all that together and really, again,
Yeah.
as we've talked about, lay it out with some actions and
Well,
recommendations.
yeah, and I'm not sure that everybody in the industry really understands this is not your father's Grace Hill, right? I mean, Grace Hill was always the learning management system, or the set of online training. Who in the
Right.
industry hasn't done sexual harassment or
Yeah.
fair housing, from Grace Hill. I mean, you guys have purchased Kingsley, you purchased Ellis, shops. Talk a little bit about the opportunities for sort of bringing together all that information on what now Grace Hill's becoming a data platform.
Yeah, yeah. Thanks for that opportunity. Yeah, it's interesting. Grace Hill's actually, I think, celebrated its 24th year but to
Mhm.
your point, I remember it was one of the first, if not the only,
Mhm.
real estate online platforms, in the industry. But yeah, I think we have gone beyond that, and we still have room to go. We want
Mhm.
to there's been a few places that we've moved a little bit slower than I've wanted to, and so
Mhm.
we're really 2023 being pretty aggressive about some changes that we want to make.
Mhm.
Um, yeah, I think the idea is that we hold all this information about people's employees, and how can we help you bring you the customer, bring all that
Mhm.
information together, and really
Yeah.
do something with it.
How do you champion, or how would you recommend? Well, how do you personally with your customers champion this? How would you recommend? There we go. What's the name?
Coco. This is my new
Coco.
Santa. Santa brought me Coco. So this is my
There
new
you
little
go.
kitten that's I can't lock out because she sits at the door and scratches. So
She'll just scratch the heck out of the door. Yeah, no, I'd rather have her interrupt this than scratch up your door. Um, anyway, so think about, how do you champion with your clients and prospects? How do you recommend to operators to champion a data culture? I'll give you subtext. I don't want to lead the witness, as it were, too much, but I mean, operators are just so much on that 30-day treadmill of
Mhm,
looking at your availability and making sure they're hitting their occupancy numbers, that
mhm,
sometimes it's hard to think more strategically. So
mhm.
how do you do it? What do you recommend to people to really champion and build a more data-driven culture?
Yeah. I will tell you at Grace Hill, being, like thinking about this company, for at the moment, we
Mhm.
do lots of conversations about what are we doing short term, what are we doing long term,
Right.
because I think you can't ignore the short term, because sometimes you can do some things, right then
Mhm.
to fix whatever's broken. But then you also have to look at, what we might make a decision short term to, put a band-aid on something, but then long term, what are we doing about it? And I think
Mhm.
that's the other thing, because, in property management, as you know, there are some short-term things that have to be done. And if your occupancy is dropping, you're going to go pull out the stops to do,
Yeah.
things that you've got to do right now because you need occupancy, you need move-ins next week,
Yeah.
kind of
Yeah.
thing. But then there's some longer term pieces that you really have to look at too. So I think it's a blend of both, and really kind of paying attention to which data lens for what kind of
Yeah.
information.
No, I love that. I've been a big fan in my communication style of what I refer to it. I mean, I picked it up from somebody who taught me this years ago, but the term, tagging something.
Mhm.
So like, I think if we help people understand and show the empathy, like you have to hit your short-term goals. Well, you're not
Mhm.
around for the long term if you don't hit your short-term goals. And so
Right.
sort of tagging things in the conversation as short-term versus long-term, I would hope that would get people thinking about the business that way.
Right.
So then you don't have to be around to tag it anymore. Like that's you sort of wire their brain that way. Do
Right.
you have do you have communication hacks you use yourself?
Um, well, like what do you mean?
Well, like I mean, just I mean, what are some ways you found because you've been a leader, you've been a leader in middle management as part of big companies,
Mhm,
right?
mhm,
You've run your own business for 18 years,
mhm.
many people reporting to you. Now you run an even larger organization. So what are some executive communication tips or little tricks that work? Sometimes the tricks and tips are very personality oriented, right? What works for you might not work for me.
Yeah.
But I always love to hear how people intentionally communicate.
Yeah.
It's so
Yeah.
important.
Yeah, for sure. I think, and I would tell you, I think today in our society today,
Mm,
communicating with our employees is a big deal and
mm,
being, as transparent as we can. And so that was sort
mm.
of, and, I think I've always sort of done that.
Yeah.
I've always felt like people could make good decisions. Your employees and your associates could make good decisions if they had all the information or as much as you
Mm,
absolutely can share with them. So, we here at Grace Hill have tried to do our very best about making information available because,
mm,
we've got great people here and we've got really smart people and there were smart people that worked for me on site. But if they didn't know all the information or they didn't know the why,
yeah.
and so I think that's another thing is I really try. You cannot do anything if you don't have good people working with you. you know
Yep.
we are all only one person. We only have a certain amount of hours in the day and we just can't do it all. So
Yeah.
hiring good teams and good smart people that then you explain the why and where we're
Mm,
going. And so I try to do some kind of all Grace Hill communication in writing,
mm,
to sort of help people. We do all hands calls, and
yep.
then I meet with, teams, occasionally, over the week and that sort of thing. But again, it's all in a empowerment
Yeah.
world. I
I'm
can't do
I'm
that. All I can do is kind of
yeah,
move
using using
direction.
using my go-to. I'm going to tag you. You mentioned it twice. Explaining the why.
Hmm.
If there's one thing, it took me a little bit in my career to realize it, but once I realized it, it was so powerful. If people can understand why,
Right.
they may not agree with the decision, but they'll support it.
Right.
Whereas if you just explain the what, they're going to infer negative whys,
Right.
right? But if you give them the why, they can go, well, okay,
Right.
that maybe that wasn't such a bad decision.
Right.
It's because she had a different priority than I have or whatever.
Yeah.
And I'm just amazed at how you can win hearts and minds when you share the why.
Hmm.
It's such a big deal.
That to me, it's so logical because
Hmm.
I'm that kind of person, and
Yeah.
I remember when we first bought a house, he grew up a farmer. And so he knew I did not. And so we
Mhm.
went out to the backyard and he hands me a hoe and he's like, here, you need to use this for this bed. And I was like,
Mhm.
okay, what am I doing? What am I trying to do? What's my outcome? And
Right.
it's an interesting part of our marriage, but an interesting, because I
Yeah.
was like, I needed to know what I was doing and why I was doing it.
Mhm.
And then, and then I could sort of, okay, I've got a hoe, here's what I'm doing. And so to me, it's super logical. I'm like that. I want to
Mhm.
know why I'm doing something.
Yeah.
And I think we owe that to the people we work with.
No, I couldn't agree more. Excellent advice. Okay, we like to. I'm sorry. One last question. I meant on the data side. I am curious because you've been on top of data for a number of years, and I know Grace Hill's trying to expand its data platform. What do you think is the biggest threat to data in our industry? What are the biggest blockers to using data better?
Yeah, it's a great question. In fact, I talked to a customer Friday and we were talking about, I think the on-site teams now have 30 to, or 20, they told me 25 to 40 different platforms that they have to use.
Yeah.
And I was talking to a customer and she's like, I'm just trying to make it simple for those people because they have lots of things
Mhm.
to do. So I think that's kind of our industry challenge is we
Yeah.
all have the next great big idea, but it requires a login and it requires an app, it requires another plugin,
Mhm.
and I think that's going to be kind of on the supplier side, our challenge to how do we sort of come together and help make it easier for the
Yeah.
customers. We're all going to the same
Well,
customer.
and,
So
yeah, and I mean it's advantageous to all customers for data to flow better between systems.
Mhm.
It's not always, at least short-term, advantageous to all vendors to have data
Yeah,
flow
right.
so smoothly. And I think you sort of touched on that. Yeah.
Yeah,
That's
right.
that's very insightful. Excellent. Well, okay, after that heavy note, we will finish with just our fun little end to all these webinars or webcasts, I should say. We like to end the interview with a fun little sort of James Lipton style Q&A, if you remember, inside the active studio,
Okay.
inside the active studio. So the only rule here is don't think too hard. Okay.
Okay. Okay.
Quick rapid fire questions.
Okay.
What book has influenced you the most?
Outside of the Bible.
Outside, well, you can name the Bible, but let's do both.
I'd say the Bible was my
Yeah.
yes, and then gosh, so many. I've just recently read Rocket Fuel that was talking about
Mhm.
running a
Yep.
company, which I thought was helpful, and Customers for Life, Passion for Excellence. That's a really old book, but I love that book. Good to Great.
Yep.
Those are
Yep.
some of yeah.
Excellent. That's a really good list. What's your favorite time of day?
Mm. I would say probably late afternoon.
Mhm.
Yeah.
What's your favorite app? Favorite app on your phone?
Spotify.
What is your biggest pet peeve?
Mm. Restaurant service that is not efficient. I used to wait tables, so
Yeah.
so I would say when I get in places like that, I'm like, they should have brought all that at the same time. They should have,
Yep.
yeah.
I've always thought everybody in service, in a customer service job, should work at least a week as a waitress or waiter in a restaurant. It's
I did it through college, and
yeah.
it was good because it made me want to keep going to college.
There you go. I like that. I like that answer a lot. Okay, here's one. Now, what's your spirit animal?
Mm. I'd probably say a lion.
Just a bigger version of Coco. Um,
Yeah.
if you had to pick one food to eat forever, what would you eat?
Does it have to be healthy?
No, it's
Brownies.
forever.
Brown.
Brownies forever.
Mhm.
And last but not least, what is your go-to for having a good laugh?
Oh, that's good. Probably, I love the movie Coming to America. That is
Mhm.
a belly laugher for me. I
Uh-huh.
would say any good, clean comedian.
Mhm.
I love a good improv and good
Mhm.
comedian. And then I would say hanging out with my daughter. She's very funny. And so love doing that.
Excellent. Well, thank you so much for sharing all your insights with us today, Kendall.
Cool.
Where can everybody find a little more about you and about Grace Hill?
Well, gracehill.com is always good. I'm on LinkedIn, Kendall Pretzer, and certainly I'm at kpretzer at gracehill.com, and probably all the above. So
Excellent. Well, audience, reach out to Kendall. She's got a wealth of information for you, and can't speak high enough. We've done a lot of work together in the past. Absolutely love what they're doing there. Thanks, Kendall.
thanks, Donald. Appreciate it.